All right. Welcome to Microcollege. This week on the podcast, we are excited to have as our guest one of the longest serving and really most popular instructors for the Driftless Folk School, which is another component of the organization, including Thoreau College. And Linda Conroy is a bioregional herbalist, herbal and traditional food educator, and a community organizer. She dedicates her life to connecting with the green world as well as sharing the wisdom of the earth. Her primary mentors are the plants, who never cease to instill a sense of awe in her daily life. Linda has a certificate in permaculture design, which she completed through the International Earth Activist Program, and has been a student of compassionate, nonviolent communication for over 20 years. Linda has participated in the doula training through the Seattle School of Midwifery and the Midwifery Assistant Program through the Farm Midwives in Tennessee. In addition, she's a trained wilderness first responder. For over a decade, Linda has presented well-received programs and apprenticeship programs throughout the Pacific Northwest, Midwest, as well as other parts of the country. She's the creator of Wild Eats Community Meals, Moonwise Herbs, LLC, and the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference. And as I mentioned, for over 15 years through the Driftless Folk School and more recently through Thoreau College, Linda has been teaching a variety of very popular classes dealing with herbs, foraging for wild foods and herbs, soap making, pine needle and sweetgrass basketry, herbal gifts, many other things. Very, very, very popular classes. So thank you so much for being with us, Linda.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's fun to talk about classes and what's happening.
Yeah, I think you've been a teacher of many people and in different levels and different contexts. So it's a real honor to have you here today. So
yeah, I actually think you said a decade, and that must be a really old bio because I really am going on my third decade of teaching.
yeah, yeah. Right, we should update that. That's from the folk school.
Yes.
Funny, time slips by in those two.
Right. Well, so half of that, because that was probably my original bio, half of my time I have been teaching for the folk school.
Yeah. So maybe even stepping back before that, one of the things we like to do here on the Microcollege podcast is to ground our conversations in people's biographies. So, and especially their early adulthood. So I wonder if you could reflect upon your life, where you were when you were 18 to 21 years old. Where were you? What was influencing your life? And what stands out as the important kind of landmarks of that period of your life?
Right. So it's interesting because I actually took a long period of time between high school and college where I didn't go to college. I had spent a lot of time just, sorting things out and just trying to, discover what my life was going to be about. I, just did a lot of traveling. I traveled across the country and just was really curious about what was in the wider world. I actually grew up outside of Philadelphia. And when I finished high school, I started actually working as a dental assistant. And then I, did some, like I said, did some traveling. And I didn't go back to college until I was about 21. And I, had more focus at that point, some things that happened in my life. And I just felt like, okay, I'm ready to dive in and really take a deep dive. I had, had some fun and did some adventurous things, and then decided to go back to college. And I went to college and I was very focused on studying social work. I really wanted to contribute. I saw social work as an avenue to change. I really, at that point, I wanted to change the world like many young people do. I was collecting information. I just thought, gosh, if I can go out and support people and help people through this avenue, it would be just really meet my deep needs and would be a way for me to have some kind of devotion. Really, it wasn't like an academic endeavor for me. At that point, I really was looking for something to commit my life to, and social work seemed like a good avenue for that. So I went to college for 4 years for social work, and for my undergraduate degree, and then I went right on and also completed a master's degree in social work and also law and social policy. So it just became my those young adventurous times, which I think like your gap year college is about that, right? It's like really having life experiences so that then you can really find what you want to be committed to. And that's what happened for me. I took some gap years before that was even an idea. And then went on to college and really thrived at that point. I don't think I would have thrived at 18 or 19 in a college setting. Because I really wasn't in high school. I wasn't that academically inclined. I was more inclined, social things and that kind of stuff. So, but when I got to college, I was really able to apply myself and just really dove in wholeheartedly because I had a passion at that point. So I think that was really such a pivotal point going from that that those years of wandering and exploring into really being able to take a deep dive. And so that's and it was interesting because I did that. I went right from undergraduate through to graduate school and completed 2 master's degrees when I was in graduate school, and thought I might go to law school, but luckily I got diverted from that. I always feel like that was a lucky diversion. I'm not sure how that would have played out for me. But interestingly enough, when I went to I went to college and graduate school outside of Philadelphia, where I had grown up, and then I moved very quickly to Seattle, Washington, where I had traveled when I was younger and really loved that area. And so I moved there and started looking for a social work job, and had done a lot of medical social work. So I ended up working with people living with AIDS for a couple of years. And interestingly enough, one of my coworkers introduced me to herbs and herbalism. And so then I started being mentored in that trajectory. And, here I am all these years later, and that's, become my passion. Um, and so there's just I've taken a lot of different paths, and they kind of it's fun because they really come together. People will say, well, what are you doing with your social work degree? I'm like, I use it, I apply it every day because I work with people.
Right. Social. Right.
Yes, it's very social.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But maybe, yeah, that's a good thread. Maybe you could make that a bit more explicit for people who are asking that question. So how doing the work with wellness, herbs, kind of natural medicine and nutrition, relate that to social work. How does that connect in?
Right. Well, it's totally connected because health isn't just about your physical well-being. It's about your whole well-being and it's about community well-being. I think that's why I love teaching for the folk school because even though it's not always perfect, I know the vision is to have a well-functioning, thriving community. And so that is part of it. So that's why social work really drew me in. But then there's that combination, like we need healthy individuals, both physically, spiritually, psychologically, to have a healthy community. And so, I'm striving for that. And, I do think the folk school strives for that too. I'm sure Thoreau College is striving for that. And we do that by being together and supporting each other. And so they're very combined. Nourishment is a big part of my work as an herbalist, really. And that's why, I always say to you, I like to cook lunch for my students
Right.
because the learning experience when you're well nourished is richer, and I really see them as being combined together. And a lot of people say they really enjoy my classes. And sometimes when people can articulate it, they will say, I enjoy it because I felt like we were in a community for the day or the weekend or however long people are studying with me.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. So this in preparation for this conversation, I ended up following some strands of reading about the history of the herbal movement in modern times and farther back. But it's this is a this is, of course, an ancient, deep kind of well of wisdom, global, regional, all sorts of different backgrounds of relating to plants and relating to the body, and but also building community in a way. And you're a real leader in continuing and carrying that on in contemporary times through apprenticeships, through these herbal conferences, and through the classes that you do in different places. So I'm curious to know how you learned what you know about herbs that you are now teaching to other people.
Right. And well, in contrast to my academic social work training, I was apprentice trained, and I've apprenticed with several different women, who both formally and informally. My first teacher was one of my coworkers at the Northwest AIDS Foundation, and she started teaching me about herbs, and I saw that people who were utilizing herbs in that setting were healthier and were thriving, even if they were living with HIV and AIDS. And so it really drew me in to have this interest for my own health first and foremost. So that's where I was mentored initially, was the interest in my own health. And then just seeing how that could, be brought out, it drew me to go and apprentice with other women and go and live with them and spend time with them and see, not how do I treat disease with herbs, because that is one way of thinking about it, but how do I live a life way where the hearts are a heartbeat? Because the plants and a lot of traditional cultures around the world have this relationship with plants that's very ancestrally based, as you were noting. Not that it's not all a scientific medical model. And so when you're apprentice trained, you're learning to live and eat and breathe and be with the plants and have a relationship with them and utilize that relationship to be able to bring the plants into your own daily life, also offer that opportunity to other people. And so that's how I was trained, and that's how I train people, is through an apprenticeship process where it's a mentoring and you spend time, and if you can live with a person, that's spectacular. We don't see that kind of model happening as much anymore, but I really like it. In contrast to the academic training, I really like apprentice training.
Yeah, this is something that's been fascinating to me. I've done again some of my own research and reading about it, going back to the European kind of models of master apprenticeship, journeyman, those kind of relationships go back to the early medieval period and all kinds of different crafts and trades. And almost always in that world, it was, you're moving into the household as an apprentice. You're joining the family, and there's a contractual relationship. There's also part of that is you are really coming under the protection and the care of the master, right? And you were working for them, and it is also, even in medieval times, one of those places where women were actually entering into trades in different ways. It was one of the places that upward mobility could happen in across gender lines, actually. So can you describe your apprenticeship programs as you run them now? Like how long do they last? How many people are you working with? What does it look like?
Well, I have several different ways people can apprentice with me, and I do offer a residential program where people can come and live here on my land for 3-week chunks at a time. And so that's a very intensive day in and day out, eating all your meals together and working together. And I love that because there's spontaneous learning that happens in that. When you have a classroom academic setting, it's very structured, and you have a syllabus and you teach particular things because you're kind of bound by time, and and you want to make sure you impart certain things, which is important when you're teaching someone something. But when you have the opportunity to actually live and eat and breathe with people, you have these spontaneous learning experiences that are invaluable, that you can't, that they're gold. And I love, as a mentor, I love those opportunities because, and it sounds silly, but as an herbalist, somebody might cut their finger, right? They're bleeding, and I'm like, oh, herbalist opportunity. And so then they live and in person get to see how to stop bleeding and how to, put some compression on and what herbs to apply and then how to wash a wound. And, so it sounds silly, but it's really powerful. I mean, I can teach that as a theoretical idea, but to actually have the experience, and not that I go out of my way to have people cut themselves, but it happens, we're working, we're trimming or pruning something.
Yeah.
It just happens. And so that live-in opportunity is just so special and unique, and there's nothing you can't get some things that you get there anyway, any other way. So I also have a program where women come and spend one full day a week with me. And that happens, spontaneous learning happens there too, but not quite as much when you're as when you're day in and day out. But those women can spend, if they want to, all 3 seasons with me. And some of them go on to intern. Like last year, a woman had just finished up her 3rd year of studying with me. And when you study that long, you've obviously made a much bigger commitment than someone who comes for just a shorter period of time. And people have different needs, and especially in this day and age, I mean, not everybody is going to take 3 weeks out of their life to be here. Although when women do, I really encourage them to savor it, because it's pretty rare you can do that in your life. If you're young and you're able to do it, and you're looking at the future, I always say, this is really special that you've taken this time for yourself and to really focus in on something and really give yourself that space and time. So there's the 3-week program, the weekly program. I have started to run a year-long virtual apprenticeship program, and to be honest with you, I was a little resistant to it initially.
Sure.
But it started shortly before the pandemic, although it wasn't because of the pandemic that it started. Most of my programs have started because someone asked me to do something. Like even the apprenticeship program originally started, I was working in an herb shop, and one of my coworkers said to me, she said, "Can I come and learn from you?" And I'm like, "Okay, you can come to my house every week." And so she started coming to my house every week. And then that became my weekly apprenticeship program. So right before the pandemic, a woman from Ireland contacted me and she said, "I would really want to apprentice with you, and I'm not really sure how to make that happen." I'm like, "Well, let's talk about it." And so I put out a call to see if there were other women who wanted to virtually meet and do an apprenticeship. And so I did, and I said, "This is a little bit of an experiment, so let's see how it goes." And partnership, and it went really well. My big thing I was worried about was, could I get women out in the field to actually interface with plants through Zoom, through this
Right.
virtual medium. And so I had assignments where they were spending a lot of time out in the field identifying plants, going through, submitting their findings to me, and then interacting. I was sending them back out in the field, sending them into their kitchens to make things. And it actually has on my 4th group of women who've gone through that program, and it's turned out to be really successful. I mean, they really get hands-on experience, and they have regular time with me every week where they can ask a lot of questions, and then they're doing lots of reading and field work in between. And then if they're nearby, they can come to my in-person classes and help. So with the folk school, I often bring students with me to help me, which is really such a gift for me to have them help, and then also for them to be there and be in the experience.
Yeah.
So those are my current apprentice offerings, and it's very rich, and it's there are opportunities to meet lots of needs. I do also have a monthly program that meets for 8 months, once a month as well, for a full weekend. So lots of different
Amazing.
ways, and like I said, it's a lot out of people's needs and requests. Not so much out of me thinking, oh, I want to offer an apprenticeship.
Right. These remote participants, are they in different like bioregions and different climates?
Yeah, and all over the world. That's been fun because I've traveled a lot, so I do know plants in a lot of places, so I can support them, um, and it's fun for the other students to, because we meet as a group once a week, and where we can ask questions and share our findings, and so they learn from each other in that way, and that's really fun.
Fascinating. Wow. And so I think, one of the things that emerges in talking to you and listening, to your story, like there is, again, you seem to be, you're tapping into a really ancient kind of archetype of the wise woman herbalist, right?
The village, you could, if you want to, I think something that would resonate with more people and they'd understand it more quickly would be to say village herbalist.
Uh-huh.
Just because it just, it makes more sense in people's minds. The wise women were the village herbalists.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just a certain way of being in the world, of being of service to a community in a way that, I think like, can you say a bit more about that? Like clearly teaching is a big part of it, but what else is it?
Right. It's so many things, it is of being of service, and it's a dedication kind of lifestyle, really being of, and wanting to contribute to in whatever way presents itself, because what you're hearing me say is I'm seeing what's presenting, what the needs are, and then if I have capacity, then I'm showing up and trying to contribute in that way. So an example of that, which was something that I had not known, it's really odd sometimes how you prepare yourself for something and you don't even know you're doing it. We've probably had that experience.
Yeah.
And with the pandemic was such an example for me. So I had years ago, I'm a lifelong learner, and I think that's another thing that is important in how I'm functioning and being out in the world. I'm always curious and wanting to learn myself, not just teach, but learn as well. So I had gone to Cuba a number of years ago, and I went as on a tour, and the focus was alternative medicine and regenerative agriculture, permaculture. So we were touring different areas, talking to different people about what they're doing there, and there's a lot of you know Cuba has had to be very creative and resilient in a world that has really limited resources. And so we met with their emergency response team at one point, and we were talking to them, and they were talking about how every citizen in Cuba knows what their responsibility is in a crisis. Like, you are supposed to check on Uncle John, or you are supposed to go to the corner and report back to this group, or everybody just knows what they would do. And as I was listening to that, I was like, wow, that's really interesting, because I don't know what my role is. But, and nobody here knows what
Yeah.
the United States knows what their role is in an emergency.
Be a consumer, right?
Right, I guess so.
Go shopping, right?
But for me, it brought up this question of, oh, well, how do I contribute? What is my role? How can I utilize what I bring to the table so I'll create a role for myself. And then I started teaching my herbal first aid classes. And when I present on that topic, I tell people to create a role for themselves. I'm encouraging other people to do that too. So come to the pandemic, we go into February and March, and it becomes clear this is problematic, and people are scared, and people don't know what to do, and nobody really knows what's happening. No matter how you feel about it, it's very confusing. So I thought, well, I have some skills and tools. I actually felt pretty centered through the whole thing. I knew it was a crisis, but I had some herbal allies. I had some inner resources and sense of resiliency that I had been cultivating. And I thought, I have something to offer here. So I decided I would do these things called herbal hangouts, and I started doing them um, teleseminar fashion, and one night a week. And I did it for 13 weeks to provide people with education and tools and practical. A lot of it was practical, breathing exercises. Here's herbs you can ingest. Here's how you can maybe support some other people in your life, and how can you stay centered in an emergency. And so I just showed up, and I had already for a number of years been preparing to be of service in an emergency. Little did I know that was what it was going to be. But that's what I did. And I feel I developed some literature out of that I still now share with people. And just the whole thing, it just was really valuable. I don't remember exactly what your question was then.
No, that's perfect.
But hopefully I answered it. I was a little caught up because I really enjoyed, not that I enjoyed that we were having a pandemic, but I was grateful that I could contribute in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was right on topic. I think that the sense of what of a role within a community, that a person can understand is something I think I hear from all of our students, right? Like what is the purpose of my life? And one of the ways is how do I fit into the kind of the resiliency, the health of the community in which I live. And I think, yeah, you've got a really clear one. And
That's a living, breathing example.
Yeah.
That I could have never planned. That was the thing of it. It was just like, wow, how on some level did the universe, and that's a thing I think one thing I can say about that really is curious to me, and I'm continually trying to bring myself back to center about this, is if I trust the universe has some kind of path that I don't understand, how do I find the threads of that and follow that, and not get distracted by the things that are distracting. I mean, there's just so many distractions, like consumerism and fear, and there's just so many things that can distract us from staying centered and following the path. And it's something I have to say I really admire that I've seen in you in the years that I've known you, is you have a commitment to something, and you continually, even when something gets hard, I've seen you really continue to to change it, but continue the thread of the path. And I think that's hard to do in this day and age, because we get distracted by so many things. And I actually really admire that about you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think that's I think resilience of that kind, I think, is built up of being part of a strong community, and certainly something that I'm striving for, and we're striving for here, I think, to cultivate in people. The comments, thinking about a role, thinking about this master apprenticeship relationship. Last week we spoke with Zach Stein, who's a philosopher of education. And one of the things we ended up speaking about, and something that his work is involved with, is the crisis of authority, right? An appropriate, especially teacherly authority. We can see, through the pandemic, other things that have happened in our recent history, all forms of authority have been delegitimized in our culture. Obviously the government and now the medical establishment is totally up for question for many people, and religious authorities, intellectual authorities, the media, right? No one really has any trust in any kind of authority anymore. It strikes me that what you do in an apprenticeship program really does rely to a certain degree on a legitimate on some form of a teacherly authority. And I'm wondering, how you cultivate that. What does that look like? And have you found that to change over the time you've been doing these apprenticeships?
Mm-hmm. That's a very complex question. So let me Yeah, let me just say this about that. Yes, it has changed. It's changed a lot. And it's really important for those of us who are in this type of role to think about what is needed. I've shared with you that I respond to what the needs are. And so I really see a need for there to be more explanation about what's happening in the relationship, and making sure that the students understand, or apprentices, participants understand what is happening and why, because it's really important to me not to diminish my own wisdom in terms of having other people decide what I'm going to share. Because you can get really dissuaded, like, oh, I want to learn this. But it's like, well, but actually, to go through an apprenticeship process, you have to learn something before you can learn that, if that makes sense. So people will say, I want to learn how to make tinctures. I'll give you a practical example. And I'll say, well, you need to learn the plants first before you can start making tinctures. You need to know something about the plant and build a relationship with them. And so, I'm feeling like I need to explain that more, why I'm making those choices to do something, to share something before I share the next thing that the person thinks they want to learn, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I didn't used to feel the need to explain it quite as fully as I do now. And I find that if the students understand, it's easier for them to go through the process rather than being in a hurry to get to the end goal, if that makes sense. And I'm really grateful, because I think early on I couldn't have explained it either. Because of my years of experience, I have some capacity to explain that. But I know when I was younger, I might have been going through that same process, but I might not have been able to have as much capacity to explain why we're going through the process the way we're going through it. Does that make sense?
That
And
makes a lot of sense. I mean, it resonates also with my experience as a teacher, primarily in, alternative or in very small teaching environments. But, I think I've gotten into the habit of, just as a matter of course, always explaining kind of the theory behind the order of things and the goals of the class. Not assuming that would be taken for granted. I'm wondering if you encounter, people who just are not going to go with that, or is there ways that doesn't work out?
yes, absolutely. Sometimes it's not, for everyone. And I say to people a couple things. One is, you get to choose whether you're involved or not. You're not chained. You do get to choose. And when you're in a learning environment, you're not going to quote unquote agree with everything. You have to have the experience, and then you can sort, as long as you're feeling like you're getting wisdom, and you're having a positive experience, even if it's challenging. And then when you leave an apprenticeship experience, you have a lot of sorting to do, and see what resonates for you, and leave the rest behind. And that's how, at least that was my experience in my apprenticeship programs. I didn't find every aspect of my apprenticeship to be something that I took with me, because not all of it resonated.
Right.
Like the communication style of one of my teachers, what didn't resonate with me, and I love her dearly, and I learned so much from her about a lot of things, but I chose to study nonviolent communication, and she very clearly told me she wasn't interested in that mode of communication, and I respected that. That's her choice, but it's my choice to choose to integrate that into what I learned from her. So I think that there has to be a mutual responsibility in that too, that it's important for participants to know that they can take what resonates and that eventually they're going to leave some things behind, and they should, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really a delicate thing. I mean, I think that we've come to think about education in our time as a transfer of information, right?
Mhm.
Maybe skills and information, right? Some very like specific measurable things. If you go, back into another thing that Zach Stein said in our conversation that resonated is that every previous form of education from every culture that we know of was conceived of as a spiritual education, right? As a whether it was run by the church or whether it was the kind of medicine man or woman in a village, or whether it was it was some other form of education. It primarily was inner formation of character, formation of a person's kind of moral and ethical and kind of spiritual qualities. And you got to think that that's really comes up in talking about plants and talking about health and talking about dealing with people's kind of inner and outer life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's central. And I know there are places where you can just learn the constituents of plants and a more medical model of plant knowledge. And it's interesting because I've studied with one of my teachers is from New Zealand. She's a medical herbalist. And I actually chose to study with her. I've chosen my teachers very specifically. I actually would encourage people who are listening who are looking to apprentice or study something, choose your teachers, choose them wisely and carefully. Think about it. What do you want in a teacher? What does a teacher offer you? So I chose her as my teacher. I met her, gosh, almost 30 years ago. And I met her here in the States at a workshop, but I really loved where she was coming from. I love that she had medical herbal knowledge, which actually in this country, because of the history of herbalism, herbalism kind of stopped being a modality for a good number of years in this country because we really bought into scientific medicine in a way that just threw herbs out with the bathwater, at least in Western culture. Of course, indigenous people, that wasn't true, but for the Western mind. But in other cultures around the world, that didn't happen. And so in this country, we tend to have a lot of folk herbalists who don't have a whole lot of clinical skills to apply. And I wanted those skills in addition to the relational skills and all of that.
Mhm.
So I've spent a lot of time with her in New Zealand, studying and helping her with classes and programs. And I spent a lot of time bringing her here so I could learn from her and
Okay.
hosting classes with her as well. And so the last time I was there, she said to me, watch, because she's doing a lot of plant relationship classes and workshops now. She's in her 70s and she's not as interested in the medical aspect. Actually, she's more interested in bringing people to her land and have them have that land-based experience. And she said, watch the students who come here are coming from a medically trained herbal program and they're afraid of plants.
Mhm.
They're phytophobic. And I when she said that, I was like, oh, that's kind of, I didn't understand until I saw it. They really were. They were afraid because everything was, is this a contraindication? It was very medical model focused. Whereas whole plants work so differently than plants that are, reduced to their parts or, prepared in a way that they're more drug-like, are very different than whole plants. And so bridging that gap and bringing that together. And so I'm really grateful for my training, but I'm also grateful to live in a place where we really, I think we do embrace the plants more directly. And I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, relationship building on the human plant level. It's a really important part of it, clearly.
Mhm.
And on that note, definitely one of the things I'd love to talk about today is the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, one of your many creations and venues in which you're doing teaching and leadership in this world. So this year is the 12th annual Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, happening May 26th to 28th in Almond, Wisconsin.
Yes.
So yeah, tell us a little bit about the origin and the present state of the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference.
Sure. So the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, it's been an amazing adventure because it's turned into this internationally acclaimed conference that wasn't my original vision. But it's another thing where I think the universe had a different plan. But I partnered early on before I started that conference with an organization called the United Plant Savers. And they're a conservation organization set up to protect medicinal plants. And I really encourage people to check them out. United Plant Savers, I'm guessing.com is their website. But they were set up about, I don't know, 40 years ago to protect medicinal plants from the wild. People were over foraging and one of their projects is to seed herbal communities. And so they partnered with me on 2 different occasions in the Driftless area, actually, at the Kickapoo Reserve. We held several herbal conferences. And I didn't know how to put on a conference. So they partnered with me and we brought the conference there and we started seeding the herbal community here in this part of the country. And not to say there wasn't any herbal community here, but it was a little sleepy. And so we started seeding it with those conferences, and we did one after we started the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference, but the first 2 were before the conference was even really an idea. So out of that, I got enough confidence to say, hey, let's put on a conference. And, I've always been really dedicated throughout all my social work and, my herbal work to women's health and women's well-being. That's been a heartbeat of my work. So I thought, and there have been traditionally women's herbal conferences all over the country. That's been regionally. And that's starting to change. There aren't as many as there used to be. And so we've actually grown into something probably bigger than we might have if those other conferences hadn't stepped out. But those seeded relationships with the United Plant Savers really did seed this conference and help it to grow. And so I thought, well, it'd be nice to get a bunch of women from the Midwest to gather and have a conference, the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference. So we started out, we had 140 women at the first conference, and we sold out really quickly and had a waiting list because our venue couldn't hold any more than 140 women. We held it at a beautiful spiritual retreat center in northern Wisconsin called the Christine Center. Have you been there?
No, but I know of it. Yeah, I know people.
Yeah, it's a beautiful space. They have this beautiful round meeting room. And so it was a really special place to hold the first conference. We couldn't continue because it's too small for as we grew, but it was very, very special to hold it there the first year. And so it's grown into, it's been in existence for 12 years. We did hold 2 conferences virtually during the pandemic. And then we went back into in person last year. And we're sold out very, very quickly. Women want to gather. We want to be together. It's part of how women communicate with each other. It's how we like to spend time in village together and share. And so it's just grown into this really beautiful sharing, knowledge-based, nurturing, nourishing environment and container. And it's gained an international reputation. We have had international instructors from all over. And in our virtual events, we were able to bring even more international speakers, which was really fun. And then we also, not only do we highlight well-known speakers, we also have an avenue where new teachers can come in and propose workshops and teach as well. So we're really committed to that, bringing and mentoring new women into the community. So One of the things is in that conference that I don't think is always really as obvious as it is to me because I live, eat, and breathe it every day practically, is that it mentors women in a lot of ways. Our coordinating team, those women get mentored into leadership roles, and oh my gosh, it's amazing to watch them come in and start working with the conference and develop into these really strong leaders in the community where they run programs and they support the teen. We have a teen camp and support the kids camp, and they run the dining hall and make sure everybody eats, and they make nourishing herbal infusions for everybody all weekend long. And so it's been really fun to watch that leadership, and then to watch the women who come year after year. After 12 years, you have women who are coming for a lot of years, and they are developing friendships and connections and knowledge, and then some of them will start teaching. So there's all these levels of mentorship built into the way the conference runs, and that's really been important to me to
Mhm.
have that be the case, so that, hopefully, I mean, really, as I get older, I think I really would like this conference to be passed on to the younger generation at some point, so it can continue this lineage, because it is a conference that is modeled um, in the realm of the village of the West.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of implied in some of what you've said, but this is pointedly, this is the not just the Midwest Herbal Conference, this is the Midwest Women's Herbal Conference. Like,
Mhm.
what does it do to create a space like that that really is centered on women?
Can you clarify your question?
Why is it important to you that this be focused on women
Mhm.
specifically as as a women's conference?
Mhm. Well, women tend to be the caretakers. They're the container holders. Women do a lot of the planning and organizing for their families and communities. So our idea is that when women gather, that the whole community and get nourished, because we want women to come and get nourished and take in, information, but get loved and cared for, that they go back out into their communities, and that's what they share and spread, and they bring that same sensibility out into the world. I mean, I- I think I told you earlier when I was talking about my early days and deciding to go into social work, I wanted to change the world. Now, I don't think I'm going to change the world at this point, but I do think that women gathering in this way affects the world in a positive way. I really find that women, they walk away saying, "Oh, I feel so cared for. I felt so nourished. Now I have some energy." Because I mean, a lot of us, women and men, are depleted in this society. We are working so hard, and sometimes, I mean, there's just so many things that tire us out. And to go and be cared for and have 3 meals a day just delivered to you, and nourishing meals. We actually, at one point, I decided we really needed to have our own caterer because I wanted local food. I wanted nourishing food. I didn't want just food. you
Right.
know? Like, I wanted something different. And for women who cook for their families every single day, day in and day out, and even for myself, I cook for myself, and I really try to cook as much nourishing food as I can. Sometimes you get overwhelmed and busy, and so being there for, no matter, you can be at our conference for a whole week. We actually have immersions, and so whether you're there for a week or 3 days, you're getting this nourishing food presented to you over and over and over again, where you don't even have to do the dishes unless you volunteer to help. So it's, I mean, you just feel so cared for, and that is the heartbeat of what we're trying to do, is create this place where women and girls and children, because we do have a kids camp too, feel really cared for and nourished, and that when they walk away, they feel like they have some energy to go back out into the world.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I mean that those temporary communities at a conference or a summer camp or something like that are for in all different kind of constellations of people are in these a number of these interviews we've been doing on the podcast actually have come up as touchstone moments in people's lives, that have placed them, where they are today, or like they go back to as a picture of education or of community that is influential to them. So beautiful. So you also do the group, the Midwest Herbal Women's Herbal Conference, also does an event in the fall. Is that correct?
We do. And the funny thing is too, I almost I wasn't thinking about that, but to mention that, so that is going into its 7th year, and it's called Mycelium Mysteries. It's a mushroom conference focused on mushrooms, and it grew out of our herbal conference, which was very interesting because we held one fall herbal conference. We decided to hold a fall event for a bunch of different reasons. And I was out in the woods walking around, and I couldn't step anywhere without stepping on a mushroom. And I mean, it was like a really abundant mushroom year, and it was just amazing. And I thought, oh my gosh, we need a mushroom conference.
Yeah.
And it was almost like the mushrooms were like, hey, what about us? So so we decided to start a mushroom conference, and it was really interesting because I went to my conference team and I told them of this idea, and wanted to see what they thought, make sure they were on board. I can't do any of this work without the help of other people. I mean, it's a big endeavor, and so I need to make sure people want to do it. And some of them were like, well, that's a nice idea, but I don't like mushrooms. And I was like, what? How can you say that? Mushrooms are the cornerstone of life. Like, if you don't have mycelium in the soil, you have nothing.
Right.
So that was really beautiful, because then it was this education that started to happen about the role of mushrooms in the environment, and the role they can play in our health, and the relationships we can build with them. And it became really clear to me that the herbal world and the mushroom world were not mingling. There were very distinct camps. Like, some people were mushroom people and some people were herbal.
Different kingdoms of nature, as it were.
Yes. So in some ways, we're doing some pioneering work by really merging the two of them, bringing them together. And then we've also underscored and highlighted a lot of female mycologists who, some of them, academic, but some of them are, self-trained, and it's been really wonderful to have that relationship, because mushrooms are relational in nature. And I noticed a whole different energy between the herbal people and the mushroom people. And I'm a very collaborative type of person. I like to network and collaborate and work together. And so it dawned on me one year, I'm like, I think I'm more of a mushroom person. I've been trying to fit myself into this herbal hat. Maybe I'm more of a mushroom person, but I think I'm more of an integrated person. But yeah, so that's been an amazing journey with the mushrooms, and really being able to bring people in to say, hey, these are worth learning about and getting to know, and women are excited. And I see over the 8 years we've been doing that, like, we have this incredible identification table that gets laid out every year, and the watching women who come year in and year out, starting to use more of the vocabulary, feeling more confident in their identification skills, feeling like they know how to work with mushrooms for food and medicine more fully, and cook them in a way that tastes good. Because some of those people who say I don't like mushrooms, I think they're talking about those little canned slimy mushrooms that they might have been fed as a kid or something. So, and there's such a rich history of mushrooms when you look around the world, and there's so many stories, and they're older than plants, so they're ancient.
It's a great example of just the way that your paradigm, or the paradigm of a whole culture, can change. I think in the last decade that went from being fungi, mushrooms they were invisible because they were not animal, vegetable, or mineral, right? They're not listed, right?
Yep.
And now I think I've experienced this also myself. When you start to be aware of that whole dimension of life, you start to see it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So the awareness of the importance of fungi to the soil and therefore to the health of forest or trees or grassland, health of fungi in the body and the gut, and medicinal and culinary and just also sort of technological kind of uses of fungi.
Yes.
I think it all of a sudden it's everywhere, right? And there's so many like things to learn and so many different, fascinating different varieties that it was invisible until you started to see it, right? And your
Yeah.
example of walking, and thinking about the mushrooms that way is a beautiful picture of that.
Well, and I think it's just another example of how my work always happens and is something presents itself. And so, and it's the next thing. Like, it's not like I'm like, okay, I think I'll have a business plan and I'll start a mushroom conference. Like,
Polling data shows, yes.
I mean, sometimes I'm like, no more ideas,
Yeah.
'Cause I tend to, like to manifest my idea. No more. But the mushroom event has just been a delight, and the women that I've worked with through that have taught me a lot and stretched. I feel like the mushroom mind has stretched me. And one of our speakers for we're already planning our keynote speakers for the fall. And one of our speakers, she's actually really an interesting lady. Her name's Dr. Cornelia Cho, and she's a pediatrician and a mycologist, and she's been studying brain science. And she's really interested in community and communication. She's done a lot of social justice work too. She's going to do a presentation called The Mycelial Brain.
Mm.
And I really excited to hear that her deliver that presentation, because I do see is a mycelial brain. There's a way of thinking about things differently that brings us together and connects us. And yeah, so it's really been an exciting world to step into.
Yeah, I think that's a powerful metaphor that again is people you see emerging in different places, the networks and the way that information and nutrient flow in a mycelial network. Yeah,
Right. And just for people who are listening who don't know what mycelium is, since I'm in that world now, I make that assumption, but
right.
there was a time I didn't know what it was. So mycelium is basically the root system of the mushrooms. It's the underground parts that grow, and they've found mycelium that's like 2,000 acres large.
Right.
And it just stretches. It used to, I mean, really, it seems like it used to be that most land, the mycelium just went on, forever. But of course, chemical agriculture and the way,
Tillage. Yeah.
yeah, has really changed and damaged the mycelium. But it is that underground, unseen part of the mushroom. And the mushrooms that we see coming up, that's like the fruit of the mushroom. If it's edible, the part that we eat is kind of like plucking an apple off a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, so Linda, thank you so much for your spending some time with us today. If folks are interested in studying with Linda, one great way is to check out the Driftless Folk School,
Mm.
with classes currently scheduled right out through November. Although I'd say get on it because those classes fill up really throughout the year. And can you say a little bit about how people might connect with your apprenticeships or with these conferences?
Sure. So for apprenticing with me, or even taking other classes, other places, they can go to moonwiseherbs.com. So moonwiseherbs.com. Moonwise Herbs is my personal business. And then if they want to check out the conference, they can go to my midwestwomensherbal.com. So midwestwomensherbal.com. And we have added a whole virtual component to our offerings at that website. So if people want to just take a virtual course or listen to some virtual recordings, there's a wealth of information there delivered by the instructors from our conferences. So anyone can access that knowledge and information virtually.
Awesome. All right. Well worthwhile. Check it out. Thank you so much for your time today, Linda.
Thank you, Jacob. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.